She didn't lower her voice. She didn't hesitate. She wanted everyone to hear. Standing in the middle of the street, HOA, Karen pointed at my 8-year-old daughter, her face twisted with anger, and said, "You are not allowed to be here. Pack your things and leave this neighborhood." My daughter froze. Her little hands tightened around her bike handles. Neighbors stopped walking. Curtains moved. Then Karen laughed and added the words that made my blood run cold. "People like you don't belong in communities like this." That sentence didn't just insult my child, it exposed who she really was. What Karen didn't realize was this: every phone was recording, every witness was listening, and the words she spoke next would destroy her position, her reputation, and her power. This wasn't just an HOA dispute anymore. This was the moment the entire neighborhood turned against her. Before I tell you what happened next, and trust me, what you're about to hear still gives me chills, I want to pause for just one moment. If you're watching this video right now, comment below and tell me which city you're watching from. Are you in New York, Texas, California, Florida? I read every single comment, and I want to know where you're joining from today. Now, if you've ever felt judged, if you've ever felt like you didn't belong somewhere you called home, or if you believe that no child should ever be made to feel small or unwanted, then take 1 second and subscribe to this channel right now. Because the stories we share here are not just for entertainment, they are real, emotional, and they expose truths that many people try to hide. This story isn't about breaking HOA rules. It's not about noise complaints or property lines. This story is about power, about prejudice, and about how one woman thought her authority gave her the right to humiliate a child in public. When we moved into this neighborhood, we believed we were finally safe. Safe for our family. Safe for our daughter. We followed every rule, paid every fee, smiled at every neighbor. But sometimes, no matter how hard you try to fit in, there's someone who has already decided that you don't belong. What happened next didn't just change our lives, it shook the entire neighborhood, exposed a lie everyone pretended not to see, and proved that the truth is louder than any HOA rulebook. Now, let me take you back to the very beginning. When we first drove into the neighborhood, I remember thinking, this is it. This is where life finally slows down. This is where my daughter can grow up safe. Perfect rows of houses stretched across quiet streets, lawns trimmed like they were measured with rulers, American flags hanging neatly from porches. It looked like one of those places real estate agents describe with words like peaceful, family-friendly, and tight-knit community. And at the center of it all was the HOA. At first, I actually felt relieved knowing there was one. They promised order, safety, standards. They promised that everyone would follow the same rules, so no one had to worry about chaos or unfairness. We were given a thick rule book, welcomed with polite smiles, and told, if you ever need anything, just reach out. So we followed everything, every rule, every guideline. We paid the fees on time. We kept the lawn perfect. Trash cans went out exactly when allowed and came back in before sunset. No loud music. No complaints. My daughter, Emily, was 8 years old then. Curious. Gentle. The kind of child who waves at strangers and believes adults are always kind. She loved that neighborhood immediately. The smooth sidewalks were perfect for a bike. The cul-de-sac felt like her own little world. Every evening after homework, she would ask the same question, "Can I ride my bike now?" And every evening I'd say yes. She rode slowly, careful not to bother anyone. She smiled at neighbors, rang her little bell, and sometimes stopped just to watch birds or draw chalk hearts on the sidewalk. Other kids played too, scooters, basketballs, laughter echoing through the street. That's when I first noticed her. Linda. She lived 3 houses down. Always outside. Always watching. Arms crossed. Sunglasses on, even when it was cloudy. She didn't wave back. Not once. When Emily smiled at her, Linda looked away. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. Not everyone has to be friendly, right? But then the notes started appearing. A printed notice taped to our door about improper bike storage. A warning email about unauthorized chalk markings. A reminder about noise disturbances during approved quiet hours. Each complaint came with the same signature. Linda, HOA board president. I brushed it off. Maybe she was just strict. Maybe she took her role seriously. People like that exist everywhere. But something felt targeted. Other kids left bikes on their lawns all the time. No notices. Chalk drawings covered the sidewalks everywhere. No warnings. Laughter echoed nightly. No emails. Only us. Emily noticed before I did. "Why does that lady always look mad at me?" she asked one night. I didn't know how to answer that. I told her, "Some people forget how to be kind. That's all." But the truth was, I didn't believe that anymore. One afternoon, I watched from the window as Emily rode past Linda's house. Linda stepped forward, held out her hand, and stopped her. I couldn't hear what was said, but I saw Emily's shoulders tense. Her smile disappeared. When Emily came back, her eyes were glassy. She said, "I can't play here anymore," she whispered. She said, "I'm breaking the rules." My heart sank. I walked her inside, sat her down, and tried to keep my voice calm. Inside, I was boiling. What kind of adult confronts a child like that? That evening, I reviewed the HOA handbook line by line. Nothing. No rule about children riding bikes. No rule about chalk. Nothing Emily had done was wrong. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about rules. This was about control. The next few days felt heavy. Every time Emily stepped outside, I felt anxious. Every time a car slowed down near our house, my stomach tightened. I started noticing things I hadn't before. How Linda seemed to appear whenever we were outside. How her eyes followed Emily. How she whispered to other board members. Neighbors noticed too. One mom quietly told me, "She's been watching you a lot." Another said, "Just be careful. She has power here." Power. That word stayed with me. Because power, when mixed with prejudice, becomes dangerous. The HOA wasn't just a group anymore, it was Linda's stage. And she was using it to send a message: you don't belong. But what Linda didn't know is this: I was paying attention now. I was documenting everything. And I wasn't going to let my daughter grow up thinking she deserved this treatment. This neighborhood looked perfect from the outside, but cracks were forming. And soon, everyone was going to see what was hiding underneath. The morning after Linda stopped Emily on her bike, my daughter didn't ask to go outside. That alone told me how deep the damage had already gone. She sat at the kitchen table, tracing circles on the wood with her finger, unusually quiet. No humming, no questions, just silence. When I asked her what was wrong, she shrugged and said, "I don't want to make anyone mad." Those words cut deeper than anything Linda had said. No 8-year-old should ever feel like their existence is a problem. That was the moment I decided I was done staying polite. I waited until Emily was at school, then walked straight to Linda's house. I didn't knock angrily. I knocked calmly, firmly. I wanted answers, not a scene. Or, at least, that's what I told myself. Linda opened the door, just a crack. "Yes," she said, already annoyed. "I'm Emily's mom," I said. "You spoke to my daughter yesterday." She opened the door wider, crossed her arms, and sighed dramatically as if I were wasting her time. "I was simply enforcing HOA rules," she replied. That phrase, simply enforcing the rules, would become her shield. She used it for everything. I asked her which rule my daughter had broken. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked past me, up and down the street, checking to see who might be watching. Then she leaned against the doorframe and said, "Children are supposed to play in designated areas." I told her there were no designated areas listed anywhere in the handbook. She smiled, a thin, tight smile that never reached her eyes. "Well," she said, "that's how we do things here." That sentence hit me harder than I expected. That's how we do things here. Not what the rules say. Not what's written. Just how they do things. I asked her why other children were allowed to ride their bikes freely. Her face changed. Her jaw tightened. "Are you accusing me of something?" she snapped. "No," I said calmly. "I'm asking for equal treatment." She laughed a short, sharp laugh and said, "You people always play the victim." I froze. I hadn't recorded the conversation yet. My phone was still in my pocket. I hadn't expected her to say something like that, so openly. You people, I repeated. Linda leaned closer. Her voice dropped, but her tone sharpened. If you don't like the way this community operates, she said, maybe this isn't the right place for your family. There it was, the message beneath all the notices, the stares, the complaints. I took my phone out then and hit record. She noticed. Her posture stiffened. Oh, she said sweetly, now you on record? Typical. I asked her one final question. Are you telling us to leave? She didn't hesitate. I'm saying that people who don't fit the culture here usually don't last. That night, an official HOA notice arrived in our email. Violation warning. It listed vague complaints, repeated rule violations, disruptive behavior, failure to comply with community standards. At the bottom, in bold letters, further action may result in fines or removal from the community. Removal. Eviction. My hands shook as I read it. Emily noticed. Are we in trouble, she asked. I wanted to lie. I wanted to protect her from the fear curling in my chest. But I couldn't. I told her, no matter what happens, you did nothing wrong. She nodded, but I could see doubt in her eyes. Over the next week, the pressure increased. More notices, more emails, more neighbors avoiding eye contact. Linda made sure to speak loudly whenever she saw us. Rules are rules. Some people think they're above them. We have standards here. Always within earshot, always calculated. I started keeping records, screenshots, dates, times. I spoke to other parents, quietly. Some were sympathetic, others were scared. She's powerful, one woman whispered. She's ruined people before. That scared me. But what scared me more was the idea of staying silent. Then came the letter. A formal notice calling for an HOA disciplinary meeting. The subject line read, Review of Residency Compliance. Emily asked me that night in a small, broken voice, Mom, do they not want me here? I held her tight and said, some people confuse control with authority. But inside, I knew this wasn't over. Linda had crossed a line, and the next time she spoke, she was going to say something she could never take back. The HOA meeting was scheduled for Thursday night. That gave Linda 3 full days to make sure the pressure didn't let up. Every morning that week, I found a new email waiting for me. Always polite in tone. Always threatening underneath. Reminder of community standards. Final notice regarding compliance. Failure to attend the meeting may result in immediate action. Immediate action. Those words followed me everywhere. Emily felt it too. She stopped riding her bike completely. She stayed close to the house, looking out the window instead of playing outside. When she did go out, she kept her head down, as if she were trying to make herself smaller. One afternoon, she asked me something that made my heart stop. Mom, if we leave, will it be because of me? That was the moment I realized this wasn't just harassment. This was emotional damage. I reassured her as best I could, but anger was growing inside me, hot, sharp, and focused. Linda wasn't just enforcing rules anymore. She was trying to break us down. 2 days before the meeting, Linda confronted me again. This time, it wasn't at her house. It was in public. I was loading groceries into my car when I felt someone standing too close behind me. I turned around and saw Linda, clipboard in hand, lips pressed into a thin line. We need to talk, she said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply pressed record on my phone and held it at my side. I've already received your notices, I said. We'll address everything at the meeting. She smirked. There won't be much to address if you do the smart thing. And what's that? I asked. She stepped closer. Leave quietly, she said. Save yourself the embarrassment. I stared at her, stunned by how casual she sounded. Like she was giving friendly advice. You're trying to evict us, I said. She shrugged. The board has standards. Some families don't fit. There it was again. Don't fit. I asked her to explain exactly what she meant. Her eyes flicked around the parking lot. 2 neighbors were nearby. She waited until they walked away, then leaned in and said, clearly and slowly, you people always bring drama. This community doesn't need that. My chest tightened. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. Instead, I stayed still. Did you just say you people? I asked. She straightened up, smiled brightly, and raised her voice. I said we expect residents to follow the rules. A performance. For anyone who might be listening. But my phone had caught everything before that moment. That night, I listened to the recording again and again. Each time, her words hit harder. You people, don't fit. Leave quietly. This wasn't implied anymore. It was explicit. The day of the meeting arrived heavy and gray, like the sky itself was holding its breath. Emily begged me not to go. What if they're mean to you? She asked. I kissed her forehead and said, sometimes you have to stand up so things can change. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse. Folding chairs. A long table at the front. The HOA board seated neatly, including Linda in the center. She looked confident, prepared. I wasn't sure what she expected me to do. Apologize, maybe beg, agree to move. What she didn't know was that I had done my homework. Before the meeting, I had spoken to a local housing advocate. I had reviewed fair housing laws. I had documentation. And most importantly, I had recordings. Linda opened the meeting with a practiced smile. We're here to address ongoing compliance issues regarding one household, she said, glancing at me. Murmurs filled the room. She began listing violations, most of them vague, some completely false. I waited. When she finished, she folded her hands and said, based on this pattern, the board is considering further action, including possible removal. Removal. That word echoed through the room. I stood up. My legs were shaking, but my voice didn't. I'd like to respond, I said. Linda nodded, smug. I started with facts, dates, screenshots, the handbook. I pointed out that none of the supposed violations applied. I explained how my child had been singled out. Linda interrupted. This is getting emotional, she said. We need to stay professional. Then she added, casually into the microphone. Frankly, this community isn't for everyone. The room went quiet. I looked at her and said, what do you mean by that? She didn't hesitate. She leaned into the mic and said the words that would change everything. People like you don't belong here. Gasps. Someone dropped a pen. The silence was deafening. Linda had crossed the line, and she had done it in front of everyone. For a few seconds after Linda said those words, no one moved. Not a cough. Not a shuffle of chairs. Not even a whisper. People like you don't belong here. The sentence hung in the air, heavy and ugly, like everyone suddenly realized what had been hiding behind her polished smiles and rulebook language all along. Linda seemed to sense it too. She straightened in her chair, cleared her throat, and tried to recover. What I meant was, she began. I didn't let her finish. Everyone heard exactly what you meant. I said, my hands were shaking as I reached into my bag, but my voice was steady. I walked to the small table where the HOA kept a speaker for presentations. I'd like to play something, I said. Linda's face changed. Her confidence cracked, just slightly, but enough for me to see it. What is this? She asked sharply. Your voice, I replied. She stood up. This meeting is not the place for personal attacks. A board member looked at her, uneasy. Let her speak. I connected my phone to the speaker. The room held its breath. I pressed play. Linda's voice filled the clubhouse, clear as day. You people always bring drama. If you don't like the way this community operates, maybe this isn't the right place for your family. People who don't fit the culture here usually don't last. Gasps turned into murmurs. I played the second clip. Leave quietly. Save yourself the embarrassment. Someone in the back whispered, Oh my God. Linda's face went pale. That's taken out of context, she snapped. I didn't stop. I played the final recording, the one from the parking lot. You people always bring drama. This time, there was no mistaking it. The room erupted. That's unacceptable. She said that. Is this how we talk to families? Linda raised her hands. I was enforcing standards. A man stood up. My kids break more rules than anyone, he said. You've never said a word to me. A woman followed. She threatened us too, she said softly. We just didn't record it. Another voice. She told us we didn't fit either. Linda looked around, panic flickering across her face as her power slipped away in real time. She tried to laugh. This is turning into a witch hunt. A board member leaned forward. No, Linda. This is accountability. I stood there, heart pounding, but something unexpected happened. People started clapping, not loudly at first, hesitant, then stronger. Support, validation. For the first time since we moved in, I didn't feel alone. Someone asked the question that mattered most. Why was a child involved in any of this? Silence. I answered. My daughter was told she wasn't allowed to play. She stopped riding her bike. She thought she was the problem. A woman near the front wiped her eyes. That's wrong, she said. No HOA gets to do that. Linda slammed her clipboard down. This is getting out of hand. The board chair stood up. I'm calling a recess. People didn't leave. They gathered in clusters, whispering, confronting, comparing stories. Phones were out. Videos were being shared. Linda tried to speak to me privately. We can resolve this quietly, she hissed. I looked at her and said, You had that chance. When the board returned, the energy in the room was completely different. No more fear. No more silence. The chair cleared his throat. Based on what we've heard tonight, he said, We're initiating an immediate review of conduct. Linda protested. This is absurd. But no one was listening anymore. Because once the truth is heard out loud, it can't be taken back. And Linda had just lost control of the room. The days after the HOA meeting felt unreal, like the neighborhood itself had shifted overnight. Where there had once been silence, there were conversations. Where there had been avoidance, there were nods, smiles, even apologies. People who had never spoken to us before stopped by our driveway. I'm sorry we didn't say anything sooner. I didn't know how bad it was. She did the same thing to us. Story after story came pouring out. Families who had been fined unfairly. Parents who had been threatened. Homeowners who had been made to feel small, all by the same woman, using the same language, hiding behind the same excuse. HOA rules. Linda tried to regain control immediately. The very next morning, an email went out to the entire community. Subject: clarification regarding recent meeting. She called the recordings misleading. She claimed her words were misinterpreted. She accused me of provoking conflict. But it was too late, because this time, people were reading between the lines. Someone replied to the email and accidentally hit reply all. So, why were only certain families targeted? Another followed. Why were children involved at all? Then another. Why do multiple residents report the same phrases being used? The thread exploded. Linda's authority, once unquestioned, was now under a microscope. 2 days later, the HOA board scheduled an emergency session without Linda as chair. That alone sent a clear message. Emily noticed the change, too. One afternoon, she stood by the door, holding her helmet. Can I ride my bike today? She asked quietly. I smiled and said, Yes, anywhere you want. She hesitated, then stepped outside. This time, neighbors waved back. A father cheered as she rode past. A little girl joined her on a scooter, and no one stopped her. Meanwhile, the investigation moved fast. The board reviewed emails, complaints, recordings, and patterns of enforcement. What they found was impossible to ignore. Rules applied selectively. Warnings sent disproportionately. Language that crossed from strict into discriminatory. Linda was asked to step down temporarily. She refused. So they voted, unanimously. Linda was removed as HOA president. When the announcement went out, my phone buzzed nonstop. People were shocked. People were relieved. Some were angry, not at me, but at her. Linda didn't take it quietly. She confronted me one last time. This time, she wasn't confident. She wasn't loud. She was desperate. You ruined everything, she said, tears in her eyes. I looked at her and replied, You did that yourself. Within a week, more consequences followed. Her employer contacted the HOA after seeing the meeting footage circulating online. Sponsors pulled out. Committees distanced themselves. The woman who once ruled the neighborhood with fear was suddenly alone. And then came the final blow. Linda put her house up for sale. The same community she claimed others didn't belong in was no longer willing to belong to her. On the day the moving truck arrived, Emily watched quietly from our porch. "Is she leaving?" she asked. "Yes," I said. Emily thought for a moment, then said something I'll never forget. "I hope she learns how to be nicer." That was it. No anger. No bitterness. Just a child who still believed people could change. That's when I realized something powerful. This wasn't just about karma or consequences. It was about breaking a cycle. Linda had used power to intimidate. The community had used truth to stop it. And for the first time since we moved in, this place actually felt like home. The night after Linda officially stepped down, the neighborhood felt quieter than usual. Not the uncomfortable, tense silence we had grown used to, but a calm, almost reflective stillness. Emily sat on the porch beside me, legs swinging, helmet resting at her feet. The same porch where, weeks earlier, she had asked if she was the reason we might lose our home. Now she was humming softly. "I think people are nicer now," she said. I smiled, but inside I was still processing everything that had happened. The fear, the anger, the nights I couldn't sleep wondering how one person had been allowed to wield so much unchecked power. The HOA board scheduled a follow-up community meeting a week later. This time, the room was packed, not with tension, but with intention. The board chair opened by apologizing publicly. "We failed to protect a family," he said, "and we failed a child." People nodded. Some wiped tears. Accountability, real accountability, was something this community had never practiced before. They announced changes, clearer rules, oversight committees. No single person holding unchecked authority again. Then, something unexpected happened. The chair looked at me. "Would you like to say anything?" I hadn't planned to speak. I had already said everything that mattered. But Emily tugged my sleeve. "Can I?" she whispered. The room froze. I looked at her, small, brave, still healing, and nodded. She walked up to the microphone slowly, gripping the edge of the podium. Her feet barely touched the floor. She took a breath. "I was scared before," she said softly. "I thought I did something wrong." A collective ache moved through the room. "I just wanted to ride my bike," she continued. "And I didn't understand why someone didn't like me." Silence. Then she smiled, small, honest, and powerful. "But now I know. I didn't do anything bad." That was it. No anger. No accusations. Just truth. People cried openly. Grown adults who had stayed silent for years were wiping their eyes. One man stood up. "We owe you an apology," he said. "All of you." Emily stepped down, and neighbors hugged her gently. Not out of pity, but respect. That moment didn't just end a conflict. It healed something broken. Over the following weeks, life slowly returned to normal, but better. Kids played freely. Parents talked openly. The HOA became what it was always supposed to be. And Emily? She rode her bike every evening again, laughing, free, unafraid. One night, as the sun set, she looked at me and asked, "Mom, do you think telling the truth always helps?" I thought about Linda, about fear, about silence, and I said, yes, even when it's hard. This story isn't just about an HOA. It's about what happens when people stop accepting quiet injustice. Because power only works when no one challenges it. And sometimes the strongest voice in the room belongs to a child who simply says, "I just wanted to ride my bike." If this story moved you, if you believe no child should ever be made to feel like they don't belong, like this video, subscribe to the channel and share the story. Backhand index pointing right, comment your city. Below backhand index pointing right, speak up when something feels wrong. Because silence protects the wrong people and truth protects everyone.